All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about sociological factors in voting. Why do people vote the way they do? What sort of influences them? And we have a couple of categories here: social class, income, unionization, gender, occupation. And this is not all of them, but again, we are going to be talking over and over about tend to, which means that a majority do, but not all. So just kind of keep this in mind. So first of all, when we talk about social class and income, we tend to see that very wealthy people tend to vote Republican, but that does not mean that there are not very wealthy people who vote Democrat. If you look at people in the entertainment field who are, superstars, whether it's music or movies or whatever, they tend to vote Democratic. So, and people of middle and lower income class tend to be Democratic. However, what the trends tend to show is that in the southern part of the United States, specifically with white middle and lower income class, they tend to vote Republican. So it all depends upon perspective. Unionization. If you belong to a union, you are more than likely you more than likely vote for Democrats, and that's pretty much across the board. Uh, the unions have always been the backbone of the Democratic Party. Because remember, Democrats, liberals tend to believe in the group and the importance of helping others, and that's essentially the role of a union. As far as gender, females tend to vote Democratic, although what we see with that is it's not that big. It's You're talking probably 60% of females vote Democratic, whereas males tend to vote Republican. However, we know that with minority voters, minorities tend to vote overwhelmingly Democratic. So one category doesn't necessarily, is not necessarily more important or a more important factor than any other category. It kind of all fits together really loosely. It's not a very concrete puzzle, let's say, where you put the pieces in and it fits in a particular place. As far as occupations go, those who own businesses and also white collar workers. And what I mean by white collar workers, those tend to be like people who work in corporations or companies that work in management. They tend to be Republican. However, and this is kind of strange because you wouldn't think it this way, but professionals, such as people like doctors, lawyers, engineers, and educators, teachers especially, tend to vote Democrat. Now you're going, well, you must be a Democrat then. Yeah, but there's other factors that fit into that. So you can't just label somebody just based upon their occupation. Certainly, it's a leading factor. Skilled workers tend to vote Democratic. So, like if you're an electrician or a plumber or something like that, you tend to vote Democratic, although not, you know, not universally. Unskilled workers does not matter. It's pretty evenly divided. Let's go ahead and move on here. Um, Now, how does geography play a role? Well, it's really what it comes down to is big city versus small rural city, or I shouldn't even have city there, but rural areas. So if you live in a big city, you tend to be Democratic. If you live outside the big city, you tend to be Republican. If we look at Indianapolis, inside 465, almost entirely Democratic, although there are pockets of Republicans. Outside 465, then we see it's a very kind of Republican area. If we were to look, and we'll look at these maps later on when we get into presidential elections, but we'll see that there within Indiana there are definitely pockets of Democrats, in Lafayette and Bloomington and Indianapolis and Richmond. Anytime you have kind of a concentration of people, you're going to have more Democratic voters. Democrats tend not to want to live in the country, but that's not universal. Education, and this is kind of a strange one, but I included it here. Uh, Generally, people who have a higher level of education tend to vote Democratic, but again, that's not universal. See, geography does play a role in this. Religion. Traditionally, Catholics have been one of the base groups for Democrats. However, what has happened in recent years as is especially in like in Indianapolis, like if you live inside 465, specifically closer to downtown, those Catholics tend to be more Democratic. However, the farther you get away from the center, they tend to be more Republican. If you're a Catholic and you live in Carmel, then you're more than likely Republican. Jews have traditionally been Democratic. But what we see is like, for example, and I don't have it here, but like Black Baptists, overwhelmingly Democratic. White Protestants, Protestant is kind of Presbyterian or Methodist or Episcopalian, any of those smaller sects, they tend to vote Republican. Now, ethnic background, and this is really, I think, one of the stronger factors. First of all, African American, we know that, and Hispanic, as well as Asian minority groups, overwhelmingly vote Democratic. However, there are groups within the Hispanic, like Cuban Americans, specifically in southern Florida, overwhelmingly Republican. So, take that as a factor. Let's kind of look at voter turnout over the last, what do we want to say, 80 years. And these numbers are in millions. So when we see 75,000, that's really 75 million. So when we look at 2012, we see 211 million. So this category is eligible voters. And this category is actually number of people who were eligible to vote that actually voted. And what you look at here is, we're supposed to be one of the leading countries of the world as far as democratic principles, but we tend not to vote very much. And in fact, in primary years, and those are years, the 2 years before a presidential election or 2 years after a presidential election, um, it tends to be much lower in the 30s. But we really, in 2012, well, let's go 2008. That was the election of Barack Obama. You would have thought that there would have been a large voter turnout. But in reality, what you get is just over 50% of the people who are eligible to vote. So the question becomes is why don't people vote? And your discussion this week or in unit 2 specifically deals with, how do we go about kind of solving this problem? Should we mandate that voters vote? Should we, some countries make it a national holiday. Some countries do it on a Saturday. Some countries do it, by email. So that's something to kind of consider as you embark upon that. But you can notice here clearly the trend starts to decrease here. 1996, this was Bill Clinton's second term. Less than 50% of the nation's eligible voters voted. But then it kind of up, kind of the graph kind of goes back up. Now, here's a couple of so if you look at this graph here, you can see that whites are the kind of the brownest brown, lighter brown, even lighter brown, tan. But what you see here is for the first time ever, voter turnout rate in a presidential election exceeded white voter turnout rate. So what we see here is that blacks are actually, from 1996 on, have actually increased their voting participation. And in fact, in 2012, actually more blacks as a percentage of total population voted than whites. So it's kind of an interesting trend. I'd be interested to see what this looks like in 2016. You'll also notice here, like Hispanics and Asians tend to vote about 50% vote, and that number they kind of mirror each other. But pretty significant that we're starting to get now. What will happen if there's not a black candidate that appeals to black voters? Will that participation decrease? Good. Well, I shouldn't say good question. It's my question. Hispanic voter participation actually is increasing. But here's what we see. So the total number of votes cast has increased, but the eligible voters who did not vote that's actually increasing as well. So, if we look at, and we're talking about in the United States, approximately 25 million Hispanic citizen, the percentage, sorry, 25 million Hispanics were eligible to vote. Only about 11 million voted in 2012. So what I mean by this, Hispanics continue to punch below their weight. They're not they're not as actively participating in voting, which makes you kind of wonder, are candidates really representing them? Youth voter turnout rate is actually decreasing. You would have thought that, Barack Obama brought about this huge, hey, change. We're going to make some big time changes. We're going to make society better. But in fact, just in between one election from 2008 to 2012, it decreased almost 7%, or just over 7%. So, I mean, the youth are not voting. So the question is, well, why would 65 and older vote? Because if you look at it, 18 to 24, only 41% vote, but 65 and older, oh, almost 72% vote. Why? I'll give you a minute to think about it. And the reason behind that is because if you're older, you have a much more vested interest in making sure that candidates, represent you. If you're on Social Security, if you're retired, you're worried about safety, worried about your retirement benefits. So it's pretty understandable. Usually, the older you get, the more you vote because you're vested. One thing we do see though is that the youth in Hispanics, or the youth, are voting at much greater. So you can see here, their high share of under 18 means that the dent of generational replacement, they will become a more important voting bloc in future elections. Hispanics are 17% of the U.S. total population, but 24% of under 18 population. So that means the percentage of Hispanic youth, oh, as compared to the overall youth, is actually increasing. They are going to be a power block within politics in the future. The millennials, which is what you guys all belong to, I don't know if you're her or him or her or him or whoever. You're going to become a much more larger part of our population as our population gets older. Right now, 18 to 33 make up 25%. By 2020, it's going to make up 36%. So that means we are getting younger as a nation. Other countries like Russia and Japan are getting much older. That will affect it. We'll skip through these two. And this is probably the most important one. Non-whites were 26.3% of all voters in 2012, a record high. So almost 1/4 of the total voters were minorities. But here's the thing. By 2020, it's expected to rise to 37%. By 2060, 54.8%. So what we're looking at is somewhere around 2050 to 2060, we're looking to be like a minority majority country. That will change a ton. How does that affect? With Republicans being mostly white male, and again, that's not universal, but certainly that's their big voting bloc. The number of total voters who could potentially vote for Republicans is going to actually decrease. So you can see in 2012, Mitt Romney only got 17% of the non-white vote. That's pretty significant. Republicans have to make inroads into minority populations. So hopefully that helped a little bit in understanding, why people vote the way they do, what sort of factors lead into it. So if you have any questions, let me know.